Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Will Atcheson, and I'm an ESG strategist at Jeffries, working closely with Atcheson. Today, we are focused on sustainable business models. But first, before I continue, let me read a compliance and press disclaimer. Members of the media and the press are not authorized to be on this call. If you are from the media or the press, please disconnect from the call now. The content presented on this conference call is proprietary to and are subject to the copyrights of Jeffries or third parties. Further, as a matter of legal compliance, we remind you that you must not attempt to elicit from any speaker at this event any material non-public information or other confidential information, and accordingly, the speaker may decline to respond to any questions in his or her sole discretion. You may not publish or otherwise publicly disclose the name of or otherwise identify the speakers unless Jeffries permits in writing. By attending this event, you agree to all these restrictions. A focus of our work here at Jeffries has been on understanding how ESG is impacting corporate structure and corporate decision-making. So we've looked at B-Works, we've looked at public benefit corps, we've looked at social enterprise corps, and we've looked at traditional Delaware C corps. We are continuing this line of investigation today with Zeal, a sustainable strategy consulting firm that supports corporates in developing sustainable business models that balance purpose and profit. To gain a deeper understanding of this, we are joined by Zinnia Duff, CEO of Zeal. She's going to start with a presentation, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A. At the end of the presentations, I will remind you, but if you have any questions, you can raise your hand or email me at w@atcheson@jeffries.com. Zinnia, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation, William.
Let's dive right in to this presentation.
There's a lot to cover. Yes, we do have a lot to cover. I will try not to speak too fast, but there is quite a lot of content here that I want to share with you. So I named the presentation The Principles of Sustainable Business Models, because I think that we will see in the future more and more new ways of doing business coming out and new business models. And what I want to give you is some idea of a framework that sums up the principles behind these new business models. First, I will introduce you to a sustainable business model canvas that allows business developers and investors to engage in a meaningful dialogue with business owners about how to future-proof and continuously develop a business for higher levels of impact through degrowth, circular economy, and a triple bottom line. And secondly, I want to introduce you to a sustainable business development framework that supports investors and board members in assessing the potential level of systemic impact of a startup or established business moving towards a sustainable, future-oriented, long-term, and livable business model. So let's just dive right in here. The problems that we're facing now are not new. It's been 50 years since world leaders got together in Stockholm to discuss the negative effects of human activity on the planet. It's been 45 years since this memo was sent to Jimmy Carter about the possibility of catastrophic climate change if we continue to release fossil fuels into the atmosphere. The president saw the note, which you can see at the top of the slide. It has his stamp on it. And even though he did install solar panels on the roof of the White House and encouraged renewable energy, he also opted for short-term gains and supported domestic oil to reduce dependence on foreign oil in the wake of the 1973 oil crisis. When the IPCC released the report earlier this year, co-chair Jim Skay said this: "It's now or never if we want to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. Without immediate and deep emission reductions across all sectors, it will be impossible." To put that into perspective, in 2009, a group of internationally renowned scientists identified the 9 processes that regulate the stability and resilience of the Earth system. These 9 processes have been named the planetary boundaries. Planetary boundaries, put simply, are thresholds within which humanity can survive, develop, and thrive for generations to come. These 9 boundaries create a safe and just operating space for humanity. You might call it the operational budget for humanity. The most recent update of these planetary boundaries show us that we have already exceeded 6 of the 9 boundaries. Crossing these boundaries increases the risk of generating large-scale, abrupt, and irreversible environmental change. We don't know how many boundaries we can cross before the system collapses. So listening to the media and other outlets discussing sustainability today could lead you to believe that you're either part of the problem or a part of the solution. Personally, I don't believe that that kind of rhetoric is going to get us anywhere. The fact is that most of us we're all part of the problem, and we're also part of the solution. From a business development perspective, 20 years ago, we still had a fairly narrow perspective on the role of business. We did our SWOT analyses, cost-benefit analyses, and from that, we could lay out 10-year strategy plans, thinking we pretty much had everything covered. About 20 years ago, we started to realize that a business is a small piece of a larger puzzle. The digital transformation happening was, to many companies, quite an awakening to the interconnectedness of culture, economics, and social interactions across the globe. It allowed for global business interactions, but from a business development perspective, it was also quite scary. It became harder to plan long-term, and most of us turned to 3 to 5 year strategy plans and avoided discussing any risk or uncertainty in the long term. And today, most business developers realize that the situation we are in right now is a complete shift in how we perceive the role of business. Our traditional toolbox was never meant for this kind of situation. The pandemic, the climate crisis, and an unstable political scene that seems only to be getting worse has left many organizations wondering if they will be here in 10 years from now. The tools that got us here will not get us safely out of here. And this shift is not a change from one thing to something completely different. It's an extension of our perspective. We're experiencing in real time the connectedness of humanity, economically, digitally, and biologically. We are forced to see our business in the context of the ecosystems that we are part of. So it is time that we stop considering revenue and profits as targets in itself. The original intention of capitalism was to distribute income and let the market move goods and services in the best interest of the market stakeholders. Unfortunately, time has proven that all stakeholders have not been taken into consideration in our current model. In fact, there were no indigenous people or any women represented in leadership when Adam Smith's policies were put into practice, nor when it was decided to how to calculate the market value of the GDP. For as long as we can remember, financial gain has been the primary target of business activities. To sell the most, win the most market shares, produce the most products. We've been told that growth and rise in GDP will fix all and every problem. But when clean air, clean water, and nutritious soil are scarce resources, will the last glass of water still be for sale? Sustainability is not a new buzzword that we can include in our strategies to grow revenue. Sustainable development is the foundation of any business planning to be in business 10 years from now. In sustainable business development, we understand that revenue and profits are means to an end. They enable us to make the impact we aim for with our business activities. Generating revenue in a sustainable business development is a driver for sustainable business development. It shows us that we're succeeding in engaging collaborators, clients, and partners in driving change. Profits should be invested in future ability to drive a positive impact. When planning for profits, the overall aim should always be widely communicated in order to ensure engagement and buy-in from all stakeholders. We do not have time for incremental improvements or disruptive innovation. We need businesses that restore, repair, and renew our existing systems and ecosystems. We need to transform business development from linear to circular economy. For some industries, that also means degrowing and regenerating to return to a balance within the planetary boundaries. We need to design business models for interdependence, emphasizing that we're all working on shared problems to be solved over individual gains to be had. We have to move away from celebrating and incentivizing behaviors that achieve financial value towards celebrating and incentivizing behaviors that provide value to society and planet. In 1987, the UN defined sustainable development as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Since we have already transgressed 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries, we believe an update is required. So we changed the wording to development that meets the needs of the present while enabling and facilitating the ability of future generations to meet their needs. To sum up, business development from a traditional perspective has been linear, single bottom line focused, independent, with a win or win-lose mindset means that I only focus on myself winning, or somebody has to lose in order for us to win. Has been atomistic, meaning focusing only on the parts rather than the whole. And very much focused on the what, the service and the product, serving shareholders. Sustainable business development is circular. It is focusing on a triple bottom line. It is interdependent. It has a win-win mindset, holistic, and focuses on the how. How did you produce your product? How did you create this service? And it serves society and planet. Putting all of that into practice, we looked at one of our main tools, the business model canvas developed by Strategizer. First of all, we wanted to make the circularity of a sustainable business model a key driver in the canvas. And we did that by adding 2 new boxes, planning and closing the loop. Planning the loop asks the question, how are you planning to make all key resources and key activities necessary to run your business circular? Because without circularity, your business activities will likely be contributing to exceeding planetary boundaries. This refers not only to recycling and upcycling, but to sharing, co-working, collaborating, and contributing to open source. Closing the loop asks the question, how are you leveraging your relationship with customers and channels in order to educate and enlighten your ecosystem to contribute to and be part of the loop necessary for your business to thrive in the future? A client of ours who delivers design furniture to high-end restaurants and hotels was inspired to rethink the resources required for their chairs. Working with the Upcycle, who maps side streams from production companies and resells it as new waste to designers and product developers, Möbel replaced their new steel supplier with steel pipes from a heat pump manufacturer. Ideally, the chairs will be marked to ensure that the resources are never wasted, but returned to Möbel when their chairs need to be refurbished. What you sell is no longer relevant. It is relevant how your product is solving actual problems in the world. The only why that is relevant is solving the world's biggest problems: poverty, universal healthcare, equality, climate change. The how and the who becomes the most important factors in your business model. How are you running your business? How is it relevant in the world today? Who runs and owns the business? And who are you running it for? How are you supporting an ecosystem that drives the change that you want to see in the world? How are you voting with your purchasing policies? Are you making companies with values that are in sync with yours, your preferred suppliers? Are you promoting systemic change and supporting female-led and minority-led companies as your key partners? Freshland is a Danish company started by Mathilde Jacobsen. Freshland is a global digital platform that allows farmers all over the world to sell their products freshly directly to retailers and consumers, cutting out the middlemen. This gets consumers delicious, fresh, and natural fruits and vegetables, and farmers get more value for their hard work. It's also highly relevant to ask who benefits from revenue made and profits earned. Do employees get a share in the profits earned? Will profits be invested in future ability to sustainably develop? Is every shareholder getting a fair share of returns? How does your business activities impact people? Internally, how many paid and unpaid sick days do your employees have in a year? What is the average cost of recruitment? The higher the cost, the higher the possibility that this is not a healthy and attractive workplace. Externally, how many health incidents have been reported in any of the businesses linked to your supply chain? How and to whom does your business provide a safe and just social foundation to? How is the value distributed? Indirectly through taxes or directly through time and benefits? Internally, how much PTO do employees get? What are the healthcare benefits? And externally, what are the health and educational benefits of the product to suppliers, customers, and others involved with the life cycle of the product? How does the business activities ensure social and gender equality? AAK is a Danish production company who specialize in plant-based oils. One of their key activities is purchasing shea fruits directly from women in Western Africa. Income earned from the crop provides women with funds to alleviate poverty and hunger, to invest in children's education, and capital to support other income-generating activities. This collaboration has resulted in 3 water treatment units in the area and has planted close to 150,000 trees. But European producers have yet to share the increase in financial returns from optimizing the valuable side streams in the production of shea with the women in Africa through higher payments of the shea fruit. And finally, we also have the environmental bottom line, where we ask ourselves, how does your business impact compare to local ecosystem tolerances? Are you taking a fair share? How does the planet's biocapacity and number of people benefiting from your product or service compare? How is your business restoring and rebuilding the environment that it impacts? What actions have been put in place to minimize negative impact? Do you have no-fly travel policies, no meat meal policies, no fossil-fueled company cars, and perhaps do you allow employees to avoid traveling during rush hours? With this sustainable business model canvas, business developers and investors can engage in a meaningful dialogue with business owners about how to future-proof and continuously develop a business for higher levels of impact through degrowth, circular economy, and a triple bottom line. The second tool that I wanted to share with you is the maturity continuum. This supports investors and board members in assessing the potential level of systemic impact of a startup or established business moving towards a sustainable and future-oriented, long-term, livable business model. Working with this sustainable business model perspective that I just introduced in the previous section, we assess businesses on a maturity continuum that looks at the level of standardization and level of innovation in the business model. We have identified 5 types of business models that each elicit different behaviors and different approaches to sustainable development. The first business model are the reactive shareholders. These are the businesses that understand that they are connected in a mutually dependent ecosystem and comply with legislation and client requirements. They limit activity that incur taxes or added charges. If we're moving up towards further standardization, we have the active contributors. These are the companies that understand that they can influence their ecosystem. They can decide to make a difference, but it is a decision that they have to consciously make. And they achieve typically certifications, environmental labels, and product declarations. These are also the B Corp companies, definitely a lot of them up here, that look for ways to show standardized approaches to sustainable development. Moving towards a bit more focused on innovation, we have the connected citizens. These are the companies that start to share, borrow, and lease resources. They create value from side streams, residual waste, and trash. And they understand that they not only create value for their clients, but also for their clients' clients. The next level is the community builder. They regenerate value for society and for planet. These are the ones that build bridges and platforms to share resources and form win-win-win or triple bottom line relationships across silos and ecosystems. And then finally, we have the pioneer. These are the companies that understand that we have to reestablish and regenerate, rethink and reinvent processes. And these companies are highly inspired by and imitating the rhythm and patterns of nature. So how do we use this framework? Well, first of all, we start by asking, where are you on the continuum? Simply understanding where you and your business organization are on this continuum will help you align your communication and value proposition to meet your customers at eye level. What is the level of your organization? What is the level of the product? These two might not be the same. We might have a very newly developed sustainable product in a highly reactive organization. How does that match the clients that we are trying to reach out to? If we're not at eye level with our clients, it's very difficult to interact and communicate. And where's the market in general for you, your collaborators, and your suppliers? And how can you use this as a way to understand how you can influence the ecosystem and help others move up the maturity continuum? As investors, you can influence and strengthen the movement towards a more sustainable world by understanding how degrowth and regenerative practices, in fact, future-proof the long-term value of businesses today. Corporate organizations should lean in and see that they are essential for a complete transition of our society. Everything is connected. And just like in nature, the older the tree, the greater its potential to store carbon and slow climate change. The larger the organization, the greater the potential to make a real difference. The chair of the IPCC, Hoo-Sung Lee, said, "The decisions that we make now can secure a livable future. We have the tools and the know-how required to limit warming." To me, that's good news. Everyone who understands and accepts the problems that we're facing can fully comprehend what solutions we will need to develop to save us from this mess that we have created. When we start to see the world differently, we will start to act differently. The world is unsustainable. And in order to completely transform our society, we will have to change our behavior and change the way that we think about business. And I just want to note that it takes 7 years to compile the data for the IPCC. So it is essentially the final warning before we will be on an irrevocable path to climate breakdown. At SEAL, we have been helping businesses develop sustainably for 42 years. We very much believe that the change that we want to see in the world, in society, can be and should be driven by businesses. This year, we chose to become a B Corp organization because the movement of the B corporations is to shift the economic system from profiting only a few to benefiting all, from concentrating wealth and power to ensuring equity, from extraction to regeneration, and from prioritizing individualism to embracing interdependence, all of which fits very well into the way that we approach sustainable business development. I hope that you will be able to take these two tools with you as you develop your businesses or choose your investments wisely for the future. I do believe that if we have a wider broader, more holistic approach to business development, we will be successful in promoting the change that we need to see in society. Thank you so much for your attention. That was the whole presentation.
Xenia, that was fantastic, and there's a lot in there to unpack. But before I get started, let me just remind any listeners on the line, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or email me at watcheson@jeffries.com. So look, there's a lot to dive in there, but let's kind of set the stage here. We talked about your 4 types of sustainable business models. We have 2 types of audiences on these calls. We have corporates, right? And then that speaks to people who could potentially organize themselves like this or react or move like that. But we also have investors. So, you were trying to bring this down to an investment thesis or understand how we could bring this in and understand the company. Are there any color, any commentary, any suggestions you have for identifying which one of the 4 they are, a business is or a business could be? And then 2, where should they be investing today? Is there different aspects? I imagine pioneers particularly important today, given the need for new technologies, disruption, et cetera. But any color on where they should be investing today and what to watch for?
I think it's interesting that you dive straight into the pioneers. And I think I would have too at the very beginning working with these business models. But what we're actually seeing is that the pioneers are almost at too high of a level for most of society to really grasp how to work with the product or service that comes out of these types of businesses. And usually the pioneers will come forward with solutions that will require a very high level of behavioral change with the clients, which is very difficult to promote. This is something that is very long-term and will require quite a lot of communication and marketing, and probably also a lot of competition. So you would like to see a lot of businesses in that area before I would even start to consider investing in them. They are important for the whole ecosystem to work, but I think that the most interesting business models are actually the ones that are a bit higher up. So the connected citizens that are showing us how can we do better instead of just doing what we've always done, but a little better. How can we change just minor aspects of our business? And also the community builders, because they are building the platforms and the bridges that we need in order to do this. How can we share resources across industries such as furniture design and heat pump manufacturers? It's not like these 2 businesses will meet each other, at a network events. They're just not going to be in the same, space. So we need community builders. We need the connected citizens that will show how we can work together and collaborate more, effectively with our resources. And the pioneers definitely show the way, but they are also the ones with the biggest challenge in front of them, because it does require quite a lot of behavioral changes in the consumer or in the clients to usually sort of embrace these solutions.
Yeah, thanks for the color there, right? Because I immediately jumped to pioneer as you highlighted. So thank you. Look, we've had one come in, and it's a 2-parter. One, on the planet boundaries, can you tell the difference between green water and blue water? And then 2, where do you think the most money is needed the quickest on these 9 planet boundaries?
That's a good question. So first on green and blue water. Green water was an addition made rather recently to the planetary boundaries, because the researchers realized that we have to look at also what is the amount of available water to plants in soil, because it's not just about water in rivers and lakes and the sea, but it's also about the available water to plants like living on the ground. And what we're realizing is that that has decreased significantly in the past couple of years, which is probably one of the things that, when this news came out on April 26th of this year, a lot of farmers might have wish that they had gotten that information, like one of those breaking news that you see, because it wasn't there, was it? It was, you know, other important stuff happened on that day. But I think a lot of farmers and people working, you know, depending on the soil would have liked to have that kind of information, because we then walked straight into one of the driest summers that we've ever seen. And when the available water to plants is limited, you know, you can sort of guess what would happen next. Yes. And
not much food, I think, is the result there. So very important metric, and thanks for highlighting. There was a second part. I think you were jumping in and I interrupted.
No, that's fine. And I think that if we were to look at the boundaries from an investment perspective, I would probably look at novel entities, because a lot of the solutions that we are seeing in sustainable business development relates to, you know, electric cars, a lot of solutions, you know, solar panels that require novel entities. And we would, you know, I think that it would be relevant to look at how do we actually provide these solutions without emptying, you know, the resources of our planet in the way that we have been so far. I mean, we're still discussing if it will be okay to go into the deep sea and take out the resources that we have identified there without really fully understanding how will that impact the sea. So I think from an investment perspective, I would be very critical as to like, where are we getting those resources and how are we planning for the future? Because we do know that these resources are limited. We do know that the competition for the rest of, I don't think that we will stop before we have dug out everything, but at some point we will have to address, like, how will we build our products and how will we build our solutions when there's nothing else, you know, to build from?
Yeah, fantastic question. You know, there's a certain, one of my old professors used to highlight that we need to take advantage of the availability of cheap energy today to rapidly accelerate the transition, because it becomes prohibitively expensive when energy triples in costs, given the high upfront fixed costs in both capital and energy required to facilitate and kickstart the transition. So fantastic color. Look, I want to talk a little bit more about the sustainable business model canvas. You went through and you had some specific questions. It seemed to me that these were more from a corporate perspective, and some of them could overlay for an investor. But if we could really focus on the financial, both the costs and the benefits, the social costs and benefits, and the environmental costs and benefits, and maybe a few questions to be asking from an investor side, I think that would be beneficial.
I think that as investors, we should start to consider how the ecosystem that any business model is dependent on has been taken into consideration to build loyalty, to build that interconnectedness. Because if we are working with very independent business models, we will risk that there will be no opportunities for collaboration, or we will be incentivizing a behavior that might be focused on financial gains in the short term, but is not really giving us the results that we're looking for in the long term. And in any investment, you would want to see, you know, what is our plan here to create the value that if you're looking into a sustainable investment, you are talking about what is the value that we want to create for society or for the planet, and how will we incentivize behaviors that will give us that. And for a lot of business models, we still haven't actually built in how will we incentivize that kind of behavior. We're still looking at incentivizing financial gains, and even when that is not really, you know, the primary target. So I would ask, you know, how are you making sure that we're incentivizing and motivating, and also maybe making sure that we're building in loyalty with the partners and collaborators that we're depending on, and not in the traditional old school way where you would like write it into contracts, but also in like an interdependent perspective, like how are we winning together? How are we making sure that this is a business model that is, you know, building synergy between us and not just, you know, interlocking us from a contractual perspective?
Thank you for fantastic color. Look, so one of the things I want to dig into a little bit is your decision to move to a B Corp. One, can we dig a little bit more color as to why a B Corp or some of the other potential alternative structures? And then, kind of as a follow-up, how is this influencing your decisions today, with the idea of being that then we can think about how they might influence other corporates as well?
Yeah, very good question. I think that we obviously assess ourselves with this maturity continuum as well. And when I started full-time with, I've been an advisor for 10 years with SEAL, but I started full-time in 2019, and in 20, I took over as CEO. And we did this assessment, and actually we found out that we were in the pioneer, because we were building business models and writing books and teaching at the university. But when I looked at like where are the clients that we're actually dealing with, and most of them were in active contributor. So we could not be further apart. And so we actually chose the B Corp because they have such a high degree of focus on a triple bottom line, which is standardization, which is what we definitely did not have. Like, we were looking at sustainable development from a very strategic perspective, but we were not operationalizing it specifically, like not consciously. We're making a lot of choices on our everyday operations, but they were not like systematically embedded in how we were running the business. And that's what the B Corp does. It forces you to systematically embed sustainable decisions in every single process of your business, small as well as large. And for smaller companies, that is a bit of a barrier because it adds bureaucracy where you might not need it as a smaller company. But on the other hand, it is very credible when you are working with larger companies that you also have these policies in place, that you are also forced to consider from every single process and decision, is this the best decision to be made? So I cannot order a paper clip without, considering, is there a local supplier of paper clips in my area within 80 kilometers? Is there a female-led or minority-led business that can supply me a paper clip? And, even that sounds a little cumbersome. I think that's really, really, I work with this every day. I'm an advisor to so many companies, and I still get all of these questions like, yeah, I need new pens, what exactly, how would you make a sustainable pen? Like, asking these very practical questions on a daily basis keeps us relevant to the companies that are actually in that decision-making process every day as well. Production companies, development companies, they have these questions on a daily basis. How do we continuously make things better, make better decisions in order to, become better and develop our products better for the future? And so that's why we chose B Corp, because you don't get around this easily. It is definitely something where you have to go through every single invoice and every purchasing order to consider, did you make the right choice?
Yeah, no, look, fantastic insights there. It sounds to me like, or one of my takeaways from that color is that pioneers need to increasingly lean into certifications, because the pioneer story is as much narrative as financial. Is that fair?
The pioneer story definitely it's a great narrative, but it's a difficult one to actually build a sustainable business model from a triple bottom line perspective. Usually they are very focused either on the social bottom line or the environmental bottom line, crushing, the perspectives and building new ways of building business models. But that is a long-term strategy. It's a necessary one, but I hope that these businesses will be funded through, the EU or, larger funds that have the patience and capacity to, invest money for a 30, 40, 50-year period of time. Most investors would like to see somebody who can actually build something that could also play out in the next maybe 5 to 10 years. And that's definitely connected citizens. Yeah, the necessity that we're seeing right now. So the business models that are within the connected citizen or the community builder, they're so needed right now. So they will have feet on the ground as soon as they, pop out. We see the upcycle that I mentioned, this platform where businesses can put in their side streams and have them resold as new waste. It was so necessary for designers and product developers to start to rethink the way that they were designing, from the early stages of their product. And so it was necessary, it was needed, and it just took off like crazy as soon as they had the funding.
Yeah, no, I would imagine. Look, you highlighted two specific tools. Can we talk a little bit about one on the business side, where you think they need to be focused first, where you think they're lacking? And then on the investing side, really, are both tools necessary? Can you focus more on one versus the other?
Well, I think that the business model canvas is the tool that you will use when you are assessing the business itself. So how have you rethought this whole business model? Because a lot of companies still focus on the product or the why, which I think is less relevant than the how are you doing this and for whom are you doing it? Because that's how we look at the problem solving that also is elaborated in the SDGs. And so that's what's interesting. We have to ask ourselves, do we need more cars? Is that really a relevant issue? Like, so how are you solving this in a new way, in a different way? And that's where the triple bottom line comes in. So that's when you're looking specifically onto one business. If you're looking more generally at a group of businesses, a group of startups, then I would use the maturity continuum to map them out, and then also maybe map out their potential clients, the market that they're in, and how does it match. The further away they are from the market, the longer it will take for the business to really, take off, because it does take a while to sell to a market. I mean, we also have some clients approaching us that are clearly in the reactive stakeholders. And one of the important assessments for us is to make sure that we don't engage with clients that are at that level, because it just takes too much of an effort, too much time, too much alignment. And it would just be easier if they work with other advisors that are more at eye level where they are.
Yeah, and look, let's you're taking about 45 minutes of your time, but there's a few more questions I want to touch on. One specifically that we ask a lot of our experts is, look, I'm an investor, I get 15 minutes with the CEO, I have a ton of other stuff to ask, but I want to ask one or two questions to really make sure they are thinking about a sustainable business model. What are one or two questions you would ask to make sure that management is thinking about it and actually could be acting on it?
Okay. I actually had a call with a startup just before this call. So my two questions when I only have 15 minutes is, what problem are you solving and who are you solving it for? Because I think that in sustainable business development, we see quite a lot of startups that identify problems without really identifying who has that problem and how would that group of people perceive the solution. We're too detached, especially from a European perspective. We look at the rest of the world and see all of the problems that are unfolding there, and then reaching out, we want to save the sea, or we want to create better solutions that has less microplastics, and that's all great, but who are we really doing this for? Because we need to know, not necessarily where the money will come from, because that might not be the same, but we need to know exactly what group of people are we addressing here and how would they see that problem.
And then is there anything you'd suggest we measure it against, right? So there's two questions: who are you doing it for? And how are you helping? Is there anything we should really be measuring it against? Is there UN SDGs, anything like that, a third party where we should think about how these answers weigh up?
Yeah, and I think that we should always look at, so the segment, the customer segment that we're focusing on, how would they see this problem solved and what kind of value would that have to them? That would be your one measurement. And then from a planetary global perspective, who are we creating value for at the same time? So if we're saving microplastics, we're saving energy, we're saving resources in some way, who benefits from that? And how can we reach out to somebody who wants to pay for that benefit? Because there's usually a two-way street on business, sustainable business models. It's not necessarily the customers that are paying for the product or the service, but it could be both. And it probably should be both, because it has to have enough value to the actual customer or client, for them to be willing to, offer something for that service. And then we'll find out like who will actually pay for the whole thing. And that's what I think is what makes this complicated, but on the other hand, also makes it quite simple. Who are we actually doing this for? Because a lot of this sounds great. Like nobody will say no to you if you are saving, the seas or whatever animal that you have but who are we actually solving something for? What problem are we addressing here, and who benefits from that? And it usually has two layers.
Yep. No, fantastic color. And look, last question from me, just a reminder for anyone on the line, if you have any questions or comments, please raise your hand or send me an email at w@atcheson@jeffries.com. One of the things you highlighted that I think is increasingly important, given the lack of standardization and disclosures, is widely communicating the strategy, widely communicating what you're doing and why and how. So one of the things I want to ask is, how can we make sure that a company is actually communicating this to the stakeholders that matter? What are some effective or best practices you've seen that we should be thinking about or looking at as investors?
I think that the biggest issue that we see in communication right now is the lack of perspective. I think that it's very important to consider, did we include all and every necessary perspective here? And I know that this, people have different takes on this, but I really truly believe that we have to understand that everything is biased. Every decision, every data, there's even research showing that research can be biased depending on what researcher did the research. So when we are working with businesses or startups that want to be in sustainable business development, we have to make sure that we have the perspective represented, within the group of people that will approve how we communicate. Because if we don't have women or different minorities represented, we will make a lot of mistakes here, because this is new territory. The world no longer is just black and white. It's probably every color of the rainbow, and that complicates things again. But on the other hand, it also allows you to be a little bit less perfect and a little bit more trial and error focused in this area. I know that's very interesting area for investors, but I think that this is where we need to be. We need to understand that we are sort of figuring out, like, who are my clients, what is the market, and how do I communicate with that, and how do I make sure that I'm not blindfolded or blindsided by the lack of perspective in the company that I represent.
Denia, this has been fantastic and very insightful. I have no doubt we're going to need to stay in touch as this, continues to evolve and becomes more important going forward. I'd like to thank you and everyone on the line for their time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you
So much.
Cheers.